No checklist completed is going to save you. No bucket list is going to save you. No amount of blood, sweat, and tears that you've poured out in your life is going to save you. No amount of cash or worldly possessions is going to save you. You can't take it with you. You'll be dead. Buddha can't save you. Gandhi can't enlighten you. The Pope can't absolve your sins. The saints can't pray you into eternal life. Muhammad can't fix you. Allah isn't able. No president, no legislation, no Supreme Court justice, no state or nation or leader or celebrity. No one can save you because there is salvation in no one else.
All right, everybody. There is salvation in no one else but Jesus. Last month, we spent a lot of time talking about, in all the podcasts, we spent a lot of time talking about Christians engaging in culture. And one of the things that came up is the necessity for families to be the very center part of where Christians engage in our culture. So that's what the whole month is going to be about this month. The whole month is family stuff. Family stuff. Does that sum it up okay? Family stuff?
Stuff.
Yeah.
Good name for it.
I probably have to have something more creative. If they clicked on this at all, it's because I came up with something more creative than just family stuff.
You should probably come up with a Latin term.
Sure.
Family theology.
What would it be? Familia? Yeah. I don't know what that would be.
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh well. We just
Latin.
completely
stuff.
flunked the test.
Put something with foetus in it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, I mean, that was the whole idea, right, of this month. I didn't actually even come up with this idea. I messaged you guys and was like, hey, what do you want to do? And providentially, both of you came back with similar-ish answers about family stuff. And I thought, how fitting, because that was one of the main things that we were thinking about with... in our previous month, that's one of the first things that we were thinking about as far as what's going to make the biggest difference. And it's the boring answer for a lot of people, right? As we engage in culture, it really just does seem like the boring answer, because who wants to just have the answer be, we want something fantastic, right?
Yeah, nobody gets any recognition for doing good family stuff at home when no one's watching.
Right.
So that's not fun.
Yeah. So we're not about having fun here.
Yep.
This is church, right? So
yeah.
No fun allowed.
Oh boy.
So why? Let me ask you this: Why do this episode? I mean, I covered a little bit of it just in the introduction, but I think on the one hand, there's so many things wrong right now going on with family as we think about Christian families even in our culture. So why do this at all?
You want to go?
No one knows.
Sure. I'll go.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, I was trying to be nice. We're looking at each other to see who's going to go first.
Yep. Just start talk. Just interrupt. It's fine.
I think the reason why we need to do this episode is because I think it's something we've forgotten over the years, or maybe it was something that our parents didn't think of, sadly, because of just it's been forgotten over the generations. Because until about a year or two ago, I thought I was doing pretty good, and then Rob started talking. I think we was at one of his groups in the after at his house, and he started talking about family worship. And to me, it was like kind of a convicting eye opener, because that wasn't something we did growing up. It wasn't something that it just wasn't something that me personally I was familiar with in my house or growing up. So it was something that convicted me, and we've been starting doing different things, trying to figure out what works for us and stuff. But I think the important thing is just it starts at home. Yeah, and I think the other thing with having a
solid family life and having Christian homes is that it's not something that can be done idly. It's not going to happen on accident.
Oh, sure.
And I think that's a huge issue in our day, that there's families should be the building block of society. And if all those building blocks are messed up, then society's messed up. That's how you get a messed up culture, essentially.
Yep.
And just last month, naturally, we're talking about how to engage culture. It should be transformed from the inside out, which would just happen naturally by families acting as they should.
Yeah, I think, so I thought about, so this is going to be controversial, but I don't care. So one of the things that I've said over and over again, and that I realize about our culture is, like, when you think about it, the most radical, unbiblical, anti-Christian folks in the culture are either engaged romantically with the same sex, which produces no children, gender, sex, same thing, or they're busy killing all of their children.
Yeah.
By all, I wasn't that great at math, right? But it seems like, given the extreme that the secular culture has found themselves in, like, it seems like we should be able to, Lord willing, just procreate and raise our families correctly in the nurture and discipline of the Lord, and then it should matter pretty quickly, right? I mean, so the boring answer, quotes, right, is actually not. It's the most effective thing that we can do, is just raise godly families.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. The culture, not the culture, but in general, but just all the people that are trying to destroy families. They realize how powerful families are. They realize how, like they're coming for your children. That's a real thing, because they understand what a valuable tool that is. And we should also understand what a valuable thing it is that godly families will change the world. It's just not going to look as fun and exciting in the beginning. And obviously that was the first thing that Satan attacked in the garden. He was trying to mess up that order that God created. The world was formless and void, and he formed it and filled it. And that was where he started out, was making man in his own image. And Satan tried to destroy that order by making things go backwards, by putting Eve over the man and attempting to get man over God. And so doing the opposite of that by actually making Christian homes and living as we should as Christians is like a frontal assault on all of Satan's plans.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things to think about too, you brought up the beginning, and it's funny that, the very first human relationship was the marriage relationship that God made Adam, and then he made Eve, and the two became one flesh, and all those things. And then in the Satan's work in the garden, he attempted to drive a wedge there. Right? I mean, that wasn't the major goal, but that's how he was doing it. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, and then not only that, but in the curse itself, you have Genesis 3:16, right, where the woman is going to buck against now the order, and the men, are going to let it happen. I mean, is what you just observed. That's what happens. So that's not good. Did you guys grow up in? You guys grow up in a Christian home at all?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did too. It was a Christian home, but we weren't intentional about having Christian culture in our home necessarily. We were kind of more just going with the flow. And so we didn't do things like family worship. Church was kind of optional, that sort of thing. But, yeah, we weren't intentional about Not always. I shouldn't say not always. My parents did try to have, teach us the Bible and things like that. But it wasn't an intentional building a culture around a Christian worldview type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did. I grew up in a Christian home and grew up in church. Was a typical church kid, typical church kid in the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
So it was like, we were there anytime the doors were unlocked for anything, and then sometimes we unlocked them for stuff. So that was my whole life growing up was church, and yet, I think it's also something to think about that even though that be true, but I did my fair share of running from God. It's not as if just growing up in a Christian home is the magic pill necessarily either, right? I mean, there are lots of folks, I think probably the most famous picture of this in our world today, at least in our circles theologically, would be Abraham Piper.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Piper's not going to be a perfect dad, because there's only one of those, right? But he would have grown up in a Christian home in John Piper's home, and yet he's very anti-God. Yeah. Yeah. He's very much at odds with God. So it's not like this magic pill, right? Mm-hmm. That just is for sure going to fix everything. In fact, one of the, we're in Proverbs at Men's Bible Study, and one of the things that the famous verse everybody treats as a promise, right, is what? Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. But that's not a promise; it's a proverb, and those are two different things. Yeah. And so that's the one thing to keep. Like at the end of the day, no matter what you do or how hard you work, or what, first of all, you're not going to do it perfectly in the situation, and has plans that you know nothing about. Yep. So we're at his, we're at his mercy when it comes to the whole thing, and we have to be, we have to go with whatever God does there, right? And did some running after that even, and so there's we've had other conversations about that. That's kind of a debate about how at what point were you actually, but
yeah.
But so much of this begins in the home. Mm-hmm. God can save anyone from anything, anytime, any place, whatever, and we see him do that all the time. We have and so God does what he wants there. Yeah. But what a head start someone has by just being raised in a Christian home.
Well, one thing I want to kind of circle back to that Proverbs is, me and you have a very similar testimony. But being raised in a Christian home, I think that, something to give people some encouragement. You raised your kid in a Christian home and they end up walking away. But the thing is, I take comfort in that, that because that's what happened to me. I ended up doing some running, but I knew where to go when I hit rock bottom. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I like with that verse. I know it's not a promise, but that's one thing, if I can do my best to instill in my kids, the love of God, and just for them to know what's right, that hopefully if they do, Lord forbid, do some running, that they know where, when they hit their knees, they know where to come back.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you do, when you grow up, you remember those things that you learned when you were little.
Yeah.
I maybe was saved when I was really little. I kind of don't think so. I have pretty strong doubts about it. But I remember when I was 5 years old having a conversation with my mom, and I told her, "Hey, Mom, I've decided I'm going to stop sinning." Because
yeah.
I said,
score.
I know. Yeah, it was pretty good. High ambitions when I was that young. But I told her I'm going to stop.
How did that work out?
Well, I told her I'm going to stop sinning, and because I don't want God to be upset with me for sinning. And she said, "Oh, Tanner, you can't do that." She shut it down right away. She said, "You're never going to be able to do that. That's an unreachable goal." You're never going to be able to stop sinning. The only way that you're going to make it is if you trust in Jesus. And I always remembered that. I mean, obviously, I'm telling you now, I remembered it from when I was 5 years old, and so many other things that she taught me, even though I don't think I was saved then, but I did have some understanding of the gospel. And when I got older, now I'm a little more sure of my salvation now. I have a little more assurance.
Good,
Yeah, that's
good.
But I can look back on all those times and see that was God working in my life through my parents. That was Him pursuing me. That was His love towards me and common grace, and sending parents to me that told me the gospel, and all the other people that told me the gospel when I was young too. So it is effective. It is actually God working, and it is His providence.
Yeah, and I think, for me it was the same thing. Like there are things that I was the kid that again was in church all the time. I knew all the Sunday school answers to everything, the Bible races, the whole 9 yards, right? And yeah, you chuckled. You did that too, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah. Bible races. And we did like Bible trivia stuff in Sunday school. I remember all that stuff.
We had a Bible Jeopardy at the church camp we went to. Somebody actually built the whole Jeopardy thing first, whatever.
Man, you had a better childhood than me. Well, we had Reformation Jeopardy.
Yeah, that was
right?
pretty cool.
Yeah. So, but there are lots of things that happened in my childhood that I remember, from that time that I think did stick with me. And that's probably the testimony of everybody who grew up in a Christian home, strayed somehow, or, I don't know if this is completely true, but it would seem to me that it's almost, it's almost like it's almost a normal thing for, a young person to be under the influence of their parents, godliest parents in the world. They get on their own. They're going to mess some stuff up, like you're figuring it out. You don't have parents so even like the godliest kid in the world is going to like mess up the finances or mess up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're not going to be perfect, like
Right.
rolling out of the nest, if you will. But hopefully all of the tools, all of the biblical tools, all of the biblical foundations, all of the things that are going to carry them on, right?
Yeah.
Through the rest of their lives. Hopefully all that stuff will be there, So what do you guys think actually defines, like, how would you define a Christian family, right? Because I can say we have a Christian family, and maybe one of your children actually isn't a Christian yet, or maybe neither of them are, or maybe, and yet you would still call that a Christian family. Why?
Yeah. I would say very loosely that it's because I'm not a Presbyterian, I would say that it's a home that's operating under the assumption of a Christian worldview. I think you could call that a Christian home, without, obviously, literally not every single one in there is necessarily a Christian. I would call my home a Christian home, but I don't have assurance of any of my kids' salvation. There's some evidence in my oldest that God might be working in her, but she's only 3 years old, so I mean, I'm not gonna go saying that she's born again yet. But if she keeps living the way she is now, I would say there's some pretty good evidence there. But regardless, a Christian home is one that's operating under the assumption of a Christian worldview.
Well, like when the fourth word you learn is heretic, you got a shot, in this life.
Yep.
Any kid that's around Ben has a shot.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, turn or burn, he would say.
Yep.
Yeah, super. He's really about political correctness, Ben.
Yes.
You know what would be hilarious? To have him on one of these podcasts.
Yes.
That would be amazing.
For sure get banned from the internet then.
Yeah. None of the leaping gnomes would like that.
Yeah. So like you said, I think like there are, when two parents are set on creating, on God being the actual God of the home, right? Choose this day whom you will serve, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
When we have that kind of an attitude as parents, so I think that there probably would be people in our culture, in our church culture, even who would think, okay, a Christian home. Well, I don't know. We go to church, and maybe it really doesn't get any deeper than that. And that I would have trouble actually calling that a Christian home if that's as deep as it gets. I think God wants more for a Christian family than just showing up on the Lord's Day to worship Him with other believers. And I think that's a big miss, and I think that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the big struggles I think that we've seen in our church culture. When I say that, I mean like the American church culture, not necessarily our local church. But one of the big issues that I've seen that is troublesome in the church world is this idea to be discipled. I'll turn my children over to Awana in Sunday school to be discipled, and then, I'll show up.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's not how it works. That responsibility still is not the church's as an institution. It's yours as dad and husband,
right,
and priest of your own home. That rests solely on you. So if and what I mean by that, you guys already know what I mean by that, but maybe you guys don't. What I mean by that is in my case, if my parents would have just turned me over to the youth group thing, my youth group, we heard the gospel, but in today's society, there's no way anyone would have been trained to enter university right now.
Right.
We heard some youth pastor preaching, which wasn't bad, but then we had pizza and games, and that's really what people showed up for and what people remember, and there wasn't really anything other than that. Now, should youth groups, be this deep hole and that do all of the discipling for? No, of course not. In fact, that's the point.
Yeah.
It's not up to the youth guy, right, Marshall?
Yep. You gave me excited here. So,
for those of you who don't know, Marshall is the elder that works with the youth at the church. Okay, cut. Go.
So, as a youth leader, youth pastor, I don't want the parents to expect me to be raising their child in a sense. Don't get me wrong. I love what I do with the kids. I love doing that. I want to come alongside the parents. I want to be that extra, oomph, because they're getting at home and maybe they need someone else that's not their parents to come and enforce what their parents are teaching them, because we all know, sometimes we don't always like hearing it from our parents. Yeah. But, but
that's because they're sinners.
But no,
where's the amen button?
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
Can you amen yourself? I guess you have the button. Oh,
I didn't.
Oh,
that was
right.
somebody else.
Okay.
But
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
But no, like I said, I think that's that's what the youth group's there for, is to come alongside the parents, and helping and encouraging them in this process. That's one thing I'm really happy about with our youth group, is we do have a lot of parent involvement, and stuff. When we do game night once a month, and most of the times when we do game nights, we'll do volleyball or whatever, and the parents get invited to come and do it. So that's been one great thing, is seeing the parent involvement in that, because as much as I love having fun with the kids and love doing what I do with them every Friday. I love that it's a partnership with the parents, it's, but it's on the parents to be doing this at home. I can only do so much on a Friday,
Yeah. And, I would say the same exact thing about, Sunday school classes, Awana, if your church does Awana, or, whatever other children's program stuff you guys, other churches do. Like the point being, this is not the church's responsibility. Right. The church's, and in fact, one of the responsibilities of the church is to hold the fathers accountable for this.
Yeah.
I would say. So, this is a tough thing to hear, but I think that, this is something that, every man has to kind of examine himself here. If you don't have any children, great. And you have a wife, that counts.
Yeah.
Right? You can't just turn her over to some sort of maybe Beth Moore garbage or something that you're not paying attention and you have no idea what she's reading or studying or hearing or being influenced with. Her discipleship is your job too.
Yeah.
I really liked what you said this Sunday in your sermon about how our job.
He has to say that.
Yeah. Whatever. Hey. So, you said in your sermon that our job doesn't just stop when we clock out at the end of the day. Our job starts when we get home. And I think that goes. That goes with the child raising. Helping with, guiding your wife through, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, I think that's something that we all sometimes, maybe lose sight on, is our job isn't just to be a breadwinner. It also means us being involved at home with the kids and, doing the family worship. It's not just, like you said, Awana's, youth groups, or whoever's job.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of Jesus' roles is he's the high priest, and we're supposed to be a reflection of that. We should be the high priest of our home, like I think you just mentioned that a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just by nature of who we are. First Timothy says that whoever doesn't provide for their own household is worse off than an unbeliever. And I think that includes not only financially providing, but also spiritually providing for your family. You also mentioned that in your sermon too, but that's it's unnatural to not be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just sinful to not be doing that. Back in Job, in the beginning of the book of Job, he offered burnt offerings for his kids. Yeah. And he said, the reason it says, as Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. So he was looking ahead of time. He was being proactive and seeing, okay, I know my kids are sinners just like I am, so they probably sin too. So I should be making offerings for them. We don't do that anymore, but we offer up prayers for them, and we should be standing in the gap between them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and so something else that I just mentioned kind of leads us to the next bit of the discussion, and that is when we think about family, I think almost always, you might even hear in a movie them say something like a couple of young wedded individuals that, hold one another tightly and then say, let's start a family.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And the stupid thing about that is you've already started one. Right. That's like at marriage, there is a family. Mm-hmm. It doesn't start when the first child enters the world. And so how important, as we think about Christian families, as we think about the importance of the Christian family, how important is marriage in that whole grand scheme of everything, right? I mean, marriage is, it would seem to be the bedrock of the whole thing. If you're going to have a Christian family, you must have a Christian marriage, right?
Well, and I think also with the whole marriage thing is, the kids should be something you've already talked about before you get married. How are we going to raise these kids? Are we going to raise them with a Christian worldview, or, or all this stuff? I think that's a big thing that doesn't get talked about when people get married is, well, how are you going to raise these these kids? And most of the time they're like, well, I don't know. Very few people actually can give you that answer of, So I think that's one thing that people need to, with the whole idea of marriage is, like you said, it's not, you're already starting a family.
Yeah.
So how are you going to, grow this family in living a godly, worldview?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for the people around you too that see it, when you think about the concept of a marriage or the concept of the gospel, you can tell it to people 1,000 times and they just don't get it. And sometimes you got to get your crayons out and draw them a picture. So a good way to do that is with the marriage. It's a picture. It's like you said, it's a gospel proclamation.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that is, we talk about. So I mean, we've even talked about it on this podcast before. The plague on the nation that this whole false idea of same-sex marriage is. And now you have transsexual stuff entering into the picture as well. But divorce was already going on all the time and getting greater in number long before that stuff entered the picture.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm just speaking specifically in our nation and sort of the idea of acceptance of some of those things. Divorce was there a long time before any kind of conversation about accepting or attempting to redefine.
Yeah.
For those of you listening, I rolled my eyes. But attempting to redefine marriage, something that God defined. No man can redefine that. But long before that, it was divorce. And they had it's so okay, side note. It's ridiculous that we picked this topic. So Donna, my wife, on her podcast, had me on as a guest recently, and we talked about biblical sexuality. So marriage and things like this came up, right? And then Michael, the Honest Youth Pastor, and the Babbling Pastors podcast, the set of podcasts about to come out have to do with marriage. And I didn't pick that either. So it's kind of funny that we ended up here. But Jesus had a lot to say about divorce. And I think the quintessential verse when it comes to divorce is, let's see, so Mark 10:9. I mean, that is a summation of what God thinks about marriages that end. It's not supposed to happen. It's just not, period.
If I had
Flat
amen,
out.
but I'd be hitting it right now.
Amen.
But yeah, and so like, point being, there's like the amount of things that have been going wrong in the American family and in marriages specifically that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
And like, what are some of the ways that you guys see in our culture that families are falling short, maybe particularly when it comes to marriage?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is people don't understand what marriage is because they don't understand the gospel. They don't understand what kind of a commitment it is. Like the fact that divorce is even a thing. I mean, the way Jesus brought that up was like, that doesn't even make sense for the created order, that there would be such a thing as divorce.
Yeah.
Not even just like you shouldn't do that, but it's unordinary. It's unnatural for divorce to even happen. So realizing that it's a lifelong commitment, I think. So I think a failure with marriages is, not realizing that it's actually till death do us part. So much of the culture brings that idea that it's like a contract. We've lost the idea of marriage being a covenant. It's actual. In the new covenant, it was sealed in Christ's blood, and
Yeah.
so it's not a matter of, you know, if I want to break this contract, I can. If you made a contract with a business partner and you had terms and somebody broke those terms, then eventually you could say, well, we're out of contract. Let's cut this contract up and I'll
Yeah.
go start a contract with somebody else. It's not
Null
like
and
that.
void. Yeah.
You can't null and void a marriage. It's just, it's done. You are now one flesh, and that's for the rest of your life. And I think it's so easy for Christians to see culture doing that, see so many people doing that, and then just bring that right into a Christian marriage. That there's always that idea of like, well, if it doesn't work out, or there's some sort of like, there could be an option of, or anything like that, like prenuptial agreements. Like, what is that? Just a plan to get divorced?
Yeah,
Well,
pretty much.
Well, and this is, and like I said, some people get mad at me for this, but it's even the idea of how we date in our culture nowadays.
Marshall, we don't care if
I
people
know,
get mad at us.
Hey, you said it before you started on a thing, so I'm just copying
Yeah.
you.
All right. Okay. All right.
And I rolled my eyes when I said it too. So if you didn't see that, but also it's just, you know, how the culture has got in and how we date as Christians too. Because think about it, when we date, you break up, you call it good. So it's already, you know, the mindset of going out there and looking for a person who is going to be your potential wife, your partner, isn't what most people go out looking for. That they go out looking to have fun, and if they happen to meet their life partner, great, whatever. They don't go out dating with a purpose, is how I like to say it. Because the whole concept of dating, you go out there, we don't get along, we break up, whatever. So the whole mindset of everybody is already geared for that divorce idea. Mentality.
Just in case it don't work out.
You know, so that's one thing I think, because that's one thing I think my dad was great about putting into me. It was like, hey, you're not dating to have fun. You're dating with a purpose, you know, and you know, if you can't see yourself marrying that girl within, you know, so many dates, don't waste your time. That you know, and and I'm, like I said, I'm not against dating, but dating with a purpose.
Marshall, tell the internet what your first date with Kendra was like. Didn't you have a conversation about this?
It was the second or third date.
Okay.
Yes,
second or third date.
But second or third date, and
hey, kids, take notes. Okay.
So, and so, like I said, we were out on a date, and you know, most of the time this scared off the girls or whatever. Not that I dated a whole bunch. I count on one hand how many girls I dated, but me and my wife, my wife now, but at that time girlfriend, were out, and I asked her, you know, can you see yourself, you know, in the future? I'm not saying you have to answer, you know, say yes right this moment, but in the future, can you see yourself marrying me? And I about blew my wife's mind at the time, because it wasn't something she was even, you know, so that's what I did, and it shocked her, and to this day she likes telling that story. You know, I stuck around after that.
Oh yeah,
just right in the beginning. Just let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Why are we actually here? It has nothing to do with just coming out to have fun. Even though, of course, you know, if you're falling in love with somebody and all of those things, that, of course, that's a blast and it's wonderful and all of those things. But it's not just about the fun. And the butterflies and stuff like that. So,
because the butterflies don't get you through marriage.
That's true. Butterflies die.
Yeah,
butterflies die.
But 10 years later, we're still going. So
something worked.
Yep. I think I was not that much of a man. I was kind of a dweeb when I met my wife. So.
It's okay, because I turned out to be a dweeb after this.
Oh, yeah.
But
hey.
all
right.
But But I think I had a really screwed up view of marriage when we first met. And I even told my wife when we first met, well, when we were dating, I told her that I'm probably never going to marry anyone because it's a failure waiting to happen. That was my thought. That's a horrible, horrible thing to say. I don't know why she stuck around after that, actually, but she changed my mind, though. Yeah. I think she might have even said, "We'll see about that." You know, but,
Nice.
The whole idea that you see so many messed up marriages, so many divorces. I grew up thinking that, it's just a failure waiting to happen. When someone gets married, it's like, we'll see how long they stick together.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it would only make sense in our culture. That's probably how a lot of people think about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Because I mean, in so much of our culture, it's basically dating with paperwork. Mm-hmm. It's like, we've been seeing each other for a while. Let's go steady.
Yeah. Well, some people actually told us that when we got married. There was a few people I know that gave us advice, and they're like, marriage is really not that much different. It's just the same thing.
It's okay. When we got married, people thought we were just, I was marrying my wife just because she was pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
That was the thing. For those of you who didn't know, me and my wife got married at 18 and 19. So
they just assumed there was a baby on the way or something.
So we intentionally waited almost a year and a half before we had our first kid just to
prove a point.
So
What's wrong with you people?
Yeah.
Layla,
Joke's on you.
our oldest daughter is literally 2 days before our second anniversary.
Oh.
So
Nice.
she's my little savior when it comes to remembering our anniversary, because I know
Nice.
Layla is born here. I got so many days, if I haven't already gotten my anniversary gift for my wife to get it. So worked out good for me.
Nice. Yeah. So I think, we've been talking about some of this happened. All of us were young and dumb back. Well, you could argue if you're Irv or someone that's still the case. But I mean, before, I know I was influenced by a lot of different things, right? Like the I kiss dating goodbye culture. That was, kind of like the Christianese purity culture time or whatever, where Joshua Harris wrote that book. And, like now we know, like, he's not even a Christian, right? Yeah. He's deconstructed something that never existed. But that whole culture was what I grew up in. I think another failure, another struggle with parenting and growing up is I always, and God bless my parents, they did all they knew how,
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I look back on, and I wanted to make sure with our boys that we did was, I grew up in youth group and church hearing, no sex before marriage, no sex before marriage, no sex before marriage. Well, the Bible says so. Well, great. Why? What's the point of all of this though?
Yeah. Right.
And I think that there's a lot of that because parents are like freaked out about this subject, talking to their children about it, that the lust would have been different. Right. But at the same time, I think there are a lot, there was a whole generation of kids that, just didn't know the why. Yeah. And I mean, what's the first stinking bunch of questions that any kid asks? Mm-hmm. Well, why?
Why?
Right. Yeah. And so, I think that was a big miss for a generation or two is like the why, like it, of course, because I said so from God is plenty. I mean, for obedience. Right. But it is helpful to understand, right? Like Jesus is still waiting to consummate his marriage. Yeah. There's numero uno, right? Like there's something to chew on, right? Mm-hmm. Like you could go down a big theological list of, well, this is what it's a picture. But that really wasn't done a lot, like in, youth group or parenting or whatever it might be. So But so, like, how have we let the worldly ideologies in our culture on marriage? So some of the stuff we've even talked about, right? Dating culture, things like that. How have we let those things creep into the church? Like, what does the church actually look different than the culture?
Well, it depends on the church you're at.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of it is that somewhere along the line we lost how to disciple and raise our own kids, I think. Because I think there's a whole generation or two where, their parent, our grandparents or whoever it was went to church and the kids were involved in all these programs and whatever, and they thought they were doing good, but they weren't discipling their own. So I think that's where our culture has crept in, because we go to church and whatever, and so many churches aren't sticking to the word. They're appealing to the culture that's around us. So so I think it all depends on what church you go to, because the culture's sadly influencing a lot of churches out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of times a lot of churches that I've seen, not ours, but a lot of churches that I've seen, they don't talk on the subject a lot because it's controversial for some reason. I think that's the kind of thing that blows my mind lately, just realizing, why is it such a controversial thing that we don't talk about? Like, why is there so much preference allowed in here when it comes to what a marriage is or what a marriage isn't? The Bible gives pretty clear instructions what a marriage is. So I think as far as culture influencing, just watch any movie. They meet and then they hook up. That's the pattern for any movie you watch. If you watch a movie that's been made in the last 10 years, it's weird if you're some sort of prude that's going to wait until you're married. Like, what kind of a stuck-up person are you?
It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so normal. And for people to live together. It's very, very common for people to live together before they're married. And it's weird if you don't. And so I think that's something, too, that clear things aren't said about it as to, like, no, this is definitely a sin if you're doing this.
Yeah.
And falling out of God's order for marriage.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say another thing, too, why I think this is so controversial is because it defines our biblical roles. And that's what a lot of people have issues with the biblical roles.
Oh.
Well, we don't want to talk about biblical roles in this church.
You mean like authority and stuff? Like stuff like that? Kind of biblical roles? Like ranks?
Hey, the preacher this Sunday had a good message about
that
it.
dude is a fool.
Yeah, I think, since you brought it up, we live in a society that's trying to be egalitarian, trying to be made up of ones instead of families, to where everyone's equal and everybody has the same rank. And I think that's totally has crept in. There's lots of young men. I never heard of any young guys my age, including myself, that were taught like how you actually date a woman, how you court a woman. None of us were ever taught that, because it was just as normal for the woman to ask the guy out. And that happens a lot too.
Yeah, that This is something, like I said toward the beginning, this is something that has been happening for a very long time. This sort of swapping roles thing. You have women that just do anything they can to be men. Yeah. They wouldn't word it like that, but that's kind of what goes on. And then at the same time, like, the dudes aren't any better. Because you have so many men who are just like, sweet, I don't have to do it then. Mm-hmm. And like, that's how the family is run. Men, if you're not wearing the pants, then you're wearing panties. That's how it works. Okay? God did did this thing on purpose. And like I want to be careful with that, because what the world seems to always think that Christians mean with this conversation is inequality when it comes to worth or importance or dignity or like a host of other things, right? All we're talking about is different roles.
Yeah.
That really is it. Different roles. God made men differently than women for different purposes than women, and women's purpose is as important.
Yeah.
And that's why it's such a big deal, because if they don't fulfill their God-given purpose that they've been created by God to fulfill, well, then it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
My goodness. Like, so, okay, let's talk about that for just a minute. What is the role of a woman? Like, what's so important about that?
Well, they're supposed to submit to their husband, to follow his lead.
That's the most. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, they're supposed to be a helper.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be a help to the mission that the husband is leading on. Just like that's what Eve was made for. She was made for Adam to help him, and that's not a bad thing. That's not that she's not important or not as smart or anything like that. It's just that she's got a different job.
The very first thing God said wasn't good was that he was alone.
Yeah.
You know? So it's absolutely not saying that she's not important.
Yeah.
Think about, so I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old at home, both boys, both becoming men. Now, at that age, they need me to be the one, right?
Yeah.
The main parent when it comes to spending time with them and pouring into them and all of those things. But she's the one that started making little men.
Yeah.
You know, like she's the one who's training them and educating them and all of these things. Like there's no way that we would be the same family. Mm-hmm. And that our boys would be who they are and would be as far along as they are if Donna wanted my job.
Yeah.
My wife is amazing because she is, right now we have 2 kids that are school age, and I'm telling you right now, there's no way I could stay home and homeschool those kids.
Yeah, I'd kill them.
Oh, my wife is a saint for that. You know, the amount of time and energy she puts into the kids with that, and I think that is just so amazing. And you know, some people, you know, want to look down on that, and I'm just like, she is pouring into those kids. She is, you know, making little women there. You know,
if your wife is if your wife is the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and my wife is staying at home and homeschooling my children, she's got a more important job.
You're such a patriarch.
Yeah, I hope so. That's what Abraham was, so that's not a bad gig. But, you know, like we don't think about it like that. And I think that has really crept into the church as well, because we have so many women in the American church that are just like, oh, I'm just a stay. Don't ever answer it like that. Right. Don't ever answer it like that, just a stay-at-home mom. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I really hate that term, just a stay-at-home mom. That's really angering to me.
I used to like something my dad would say. So, you know, because when you're a kid or whatever, I think we used to, I can't remember what brought up. I think it was like, why doesn't mom like go to work? Then we could, you know, have more money or something, because, you know, I can't remember what it was, but my dad looked at me and told me, he was like, son, I can't make enough to pay your mom what she does at home. Mm-hmm. He's like, I hand her over my paycheck every week, and it's not enough for what she does for you kids.
Yeah.
And of course, at the time, me being a bratty teenage boy, I didn't understand it. But now, seeing it with my own wife, it's like, you know, I can't pay that woman enough for what she does at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I were to send my kids to a private school to get the same kind of education that they're getting at home, and pay for all of the other kind of chores and home organization and all of the things that Donna, what do I say when anybody wants to get together with us or do some sort of outing? I say to like Tanner, I'll say, well, I'll tell you what, you tell Taylor and I'll tell Donna and we'll just show up.
Yeah.
Right. Whenever they say like that, like, but there's not a more important job in all the world. Mm-hmm. The job that we have as men and husbands, dads, whatever, is just equal.
Yeah.
The only difference is, that's what the whole sermon was about this week. The whole idea of be subject to your own husbands. It's a military term. All it is rank.
Yeah.
All it is that God made men to lead. That's as deep as the rabbit hole goes.
Yeah. Well, if you ever think about, like, if you've ever worked on a job where everyone thinks they're the foreman, nothing gets done. It's so inefficient because everybody's just doing their own thing. There's no organization and there's fighting and stuff has to be redone. But when a home is operating the way it should be, where the man's leading and the woman is submitting and they're both doing each of their jobs that they're supposed to be doing, it's so much more efficient. Everything works the way it's supposed to. It's smooth. It's the way God ordered it. So, of course, it works.
Tanner being in her role.
Being in her role.
Like, you know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
I don't, my wife doesn't seem unhappy or mad at me or like she hates it. Like,
yeah. My wife often thanks me for that we have the convictions we do because it makes her feel more secure. Not that I'm doing something extra special. I'm just doing only what I'm supposed to do. And not even that most of the time. But, I mean, yeah, she enjoys it. She feels secure. She feels like she's doing what she's supposed to be doing. It elevates her worth because she's living in the capacity that God made for her. So she's not trying to do a bunch of things that are devaluing her. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's such a lie in our culture. Now, I mean, if anyone's on the fence, they've already shut this sucker off. But it's such a lie in our culture that this whole, I'm just stuck at home, not doing things that I'd like to do, not doing important stuff. Like, that's how some women feel. And it's because of the influence of the culture. It's just because, girl, you don't know how important you are.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, I can't remember who said it, but whoever, the quote that says, "Whoever, the hand that rocks cradle
Rules the world."
ruled."
Yeah.
And that's such a true thing, and I think that's something that's happened in our Christian homes and this. And I'm not saying there's anything against daycare or whatever, but or childcare or whatever, but when you can't have the mom at home with the kids, you have someone else raising your kids. They're getting somebody else's opinions on life, their worldview, their, So to me, that's worth it. I get not everybody can do it, and we've been blessed our whole life to be in that situation where I've been able to keep my wife. I shouldn't say keep it, but my wife's had the option to stay home and raise our kids. So.
Yeah, that just made me think of two things. First, that it is tough, I think, for women when they. I know it's tough for Taylor when we first started having kids. Then all of a sudden, things definitely changed because she was able to have a job before that, and a job that was going out into the workforce and getting paid, a different kind of job. So it was a pretty radical change for her. And when you have the whole world saying, "Oh, you're not going to work anymore. You're going to." No, I'm going to work way harder is what I'm going to do. But
right.
When you have the whole world saying that, it makes it really tough on them. And I think it's there's definitely an adjustment that has to happen there. And I think it's very humbling for women to have to go through that. But it's good for them. Just any humbling that God gives us, pushing us into the role that we were made for. At first, it's rough and it stinks. But it gets better after that because you become more conformed to his image in it. That's his way of sanctifying you. So if I totally get the understanding, and when we first got married and when we first started having kids, I I had to really learn to fight back from trying to just make it super easy on her and trying to take away all those tough things, because I was really robbing her of sanctification when I was doing that. I think
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea of like robbing sanctification, that's a really important point, because that really is true, you know, and particularly so. How old are your kids?
3, 2, and 0.
Right. And you, how old are your kids?
I'm gonna get in trouble for this. An almost 8, and almost 7, a 4, and a 1.5.
Okay.
I'm probably gonna get in trouble for that
So
later.
no, it's okay. Listen, so your wives are in a stage that mine is not anymore, and it is difficult, you know. So my wife still has a difficult time. I don't want to paint the picture like that just goes away, right? Because it doesn't. She's like our boys. For me, part of the battle right now, at the age that they are, 14 and 12. Part of the battle now is to get them to understand, look, you have your own kids. Don't try and boss one another. Get your own wife. Your mom, you honor her. She's the queen of the home. Like, so I'm having to kind of make sure that they understand, look, just because you're a little bit bigger now, don't mean you can talk back to your mama all of a sudden, right? Like that, no. So it's a little bit different, right? The stage that we're in. But we also went on a date earlier.
Yeah.
And just left them at home.
What's that like?
Right. Yeah, it'll happen, right? It'll happen. But so like that's the different stages are different, right? And the stage that both of your wives are in right now is, I mean, one of the toughest.
Yeah.
Because you're always on call.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, especially with the babies that you guys got, you know,
all night, all day.
Yeah.
They want mom.
Yeah.
When they wake
we
up.
had a worship leader training retreat, sort of a thing or whatever. And one of our worship leaders is a young mom and just had a baby like a month or two ago. It wasn't that long ago, right? And she had to bring baby, right? It wasn't like, and he would have been at home. Like this was Saturday. He watched the other boys, her husband, right? But she had to bring the baby because like he's not feeding it,
Right.
You know what I mean? So you're just you have like zero freedom. You're always on call.
Yeah.
You're always doing that job and fulfilling that role, and it does get a little bit easier, that part of it. But I mean, the stages are difficult. They just are. They're different. Each one of them is a different sort of difficult. But it is the whole point of this bit of the conversation is just to say that keeping the roles the way that they should be in the family, every one of them is very important.
Yeah.
And for a family to work the way that God intended it to work, including the children, it's like the hierarchy has to be what it is.
Yeah.
In the Bible. So what? How do you? Let's talk about this for a minute, because one of the trends that you see in even in Christian culture, one of the things, frankly, that leads some people to divorce, okay, which is obviously the wrong avenue, right? But one of the things that leads some people to divorce, I can sympathize with a little bit, the struggle anyway, because you spend your whole life. Now, admittedly, not one of us has even one child that's out of the home yet, right?
Right.
But you spend your whole life, your whole married life, as soon as you have a child, spend, a couple decades, 18 years,
Yeah.
then, right? But you spend just a couple of decades almost with these little people running things in a certain sense, right? Like They have things to do. They have things to learn, right? A lot of attention and focus poured into raising the children. And then, like, they move out, and then mom and dad are like, so, hi, I'm Rob. Who are you?
Yeah.
Right, right. And then it's just this really difficult thing. I personally think that a big part of that is because the purpose, the whole identity of, especially a mom. It's especially hard on a mom because she's been there, you know. But the whole identity of a person sometimes gets wrapped up in dad and mom. And somewhere along the way, you've lost husband and wife. So how do you protect that?
Okay.
What's your plan?
Well, so for us, we actually have been blessed to have, at least here, since we moved here in Dixon 4 years ago, whatever, we've been blessed to have plenty of babysitters willing for hire here. So we get to get out, you know, whether it's once a month or, you know, whatever. We make sure to have that date night without the kids, if we, you know, it's possible.
And you guys just get on Craigslist and find babysitters, right?
No, actually no. But no, here at the church we have a lot of wanting and eager young ladies that want to watch kids, and are willing to do it for pay. So,
Yeah.
or I think we've, but even then, like, I know for us, I know everybody's got a different routine, but like for us, the kids go to bed at 8 o'clock, and so we, from like 8 to 10, 9:30, that's our time to talk, hang out, and, you know, whether it's just watching a movie and talking or whatever. So I think that's something too, is to make time for each other. You know, whether it's, you know, sometimes it's just me asking her, you know, what she do in her devotions that day, or you know, or how was her day, or letting her unload about how her day was, you know. So I think carving out that time, whether it's, you know, an hour at the end of the day just to sit down and talk and, you know, kind of catch up, or, you know, I still think those date nights are important, but, you know, sometimes maybe you got to change your idea of a date night.
Yeah.
You know, to guard that, you know, this is my wife, and I always joke, it's a jokingly game, but, you know, we'll fight over my wife with the girls. We'll do like mine, and I always like throwing in there, I had her first.
Yeah.
So I guess trying to remember that, you know, you were boyfriend and girlfriend, or husband and, you know, wife before you were mom and dad. So, you know, the kids leave, you still got each other after that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good stuff too, making time for each other. We try to do the bedtime thing too, and date nights when we can.
Which is a lot tougher at the stage you guys are both at.
Yeah. Yeah,
tougher
I'm
to
hoping
find
in the
time.
future it'll be easier to do the date night thing, but when they're this young, yeah, it's tough. But
It will be.
Rob over there, just, I can leave the kids at home.
yeah,
As long as there's no smoke coming out of the sky, I'm good.
right.
It's insured.
So one thing we also do that we keep a plan to do is we're very intentional about letting our kids know, kind of like you were saying about you fight over she's mine. We're very intentional about making sure the kids know that it's more important that we spend time together. Sometimes we kick them out of the room and, you know, tell them go play in the other room. We're going to talk. And when I get home, I've been trying lately to just spend time talking to Taylor before I talk to the kids. You know, I'll say hi to them and stuff when I come in, but then they need to be quiet. They're not allowed to interrupt us because we're talking. And things like that. Just showing them that actually the marriage is priority. Even though that seems kind of mean sometimes, I think, to lots of people. You know,
In our culture especially, yeah.
yeah, the kids are supposed to be your everything, and you drop everything at the drop of a hat. But and it's tempting to do that. It is tempting for us to do that too. But I think it's very important that the kids know that that I even tell them, like, mom is more important than you. I love mom more. She's the number one priority. I think they need to know that.
Oh,
Yeah,
no-
she was here before you, and she'll be here after you.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that also another thing. It's a lead by example. Unlike you guys, I don't have boys. I have all girls. So for me, it's I want to show my girls what to expect in their future husbands. I want them to see how me and their mom treat each other. I want to see, and Grant, they'll be able to pick us apart and say we weren't perfect, but
Oh yeah.
but
Well,
I'm hoping by the example.
but they won't do that because you're godly.
Oh, whatever. I haven't hit the teenagers
Don't call them
yet. Just wait till the teenagers; they'll be gladly to point out every one
yeah,
of my.
yeah.
But that's also, I think, very important too, is the example you're setting, and then for you with the boys, showing them how a husband treats his
Yeah.
wife. But
Yeah, I don't want to. They don't listen to this. Okay, taking a chance to embarrass them, right? So they were gone all week. This past week, visiting Donna, and both boys were gone, and visiting her dad. And I began. They were supposed to be doing school while they were there. That's one of the beautiful things about homeschool. And every day, like I began the day, like I send both of them scriptures and talk to them, and hey, encourage and try to spur them on, right, for the day. Like, hey, serve Papa while you're there. Like, fix his stuff, or help, but respect your mom. Just jump in and do school. Don't make it, all those kinds of things, right? And still every day, Donna would text me, I don't know what to do with the kids. They're just not, they're fighting and all these things, right? And so finally, I think she said something to me. Was it like Wednesday? And I said to her back, I was like, okay, listen, the next time I have to call them, or the next time that I talk to them, if it's because of this, I'm gonna kill them. and so later that it was the next day, and I had done it again. Like, I reached out to them in the morning, I'm just trying to be nice, And then Donna texts me, and she's like, will you call the boys and have that stern chat with them? And then she texted right after that and said, I'm having Dallas call you. And so we had you need to be a freaking man and knock it off talk. and it was better the whole rest of the time. Sometimes dudes just need a good butt chewing,
Yeah.
I mean, really. And I think that those kinds of things are going to speak volumes when they're older. I think one of the things that Christian parents need to understand is what they're doing. You have all girls. You have a mix. I have boys. Every set of Christian parents, okay, for that matter, every set of parents is actively every day teaching their daughters what kind of men to look for.
Yeah.
Teaching their daughters what kind of woman to be. By watching mom. And the same for boys. Every day I have to realize that the way that I act, the things that they hear me say, the way that I joke, all of it, right? I'm teaching my sons what it is supposed to look like to be a godly man. And so when I look in the mirror, what I have to ask is, am I? Am I really, though? And so you really are. You're shaping them and molding them, and you don't even know it. I had this conversation one time with a guy who was abusive, verbally abusive to his wife, would throw things across the room, and just was scary, right? And she was scared, and she called me and another elder over because she was scared. He picked something up and threw it across the kitchen, and it broke or something. And anyway, part of the whole conversation, like once we were there, because he cared more about his daughter than his wife, and so I brought that up. I was like, you're teaching her. You're teaching her what kind of man to go out and get. Do you want a man that does this to her? Wouldn't this make you want to kill a man if he was acting like this with her? And that was heavier. I mean, it shouldn't be,
Right.
But that was heavier, and it should be a heavy thing for us to all think about when we think about that kind of thing. All right. What's the purpose of marriage besides just raising kids? We've talked about that a little bit, right? What's the purpose of the whole thing?
He's
counting.
Is he counting purposes right
I think
now?
so.
So I'm just going to say three words. Maybe not 3 words. 2 words. Glorifying God. That's
Ah.
the main reason is we're doing everything we do is for the glory of God.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's not wrong. That's kind of a Sunday school answer, but
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Fine.
So, what's the main reason for this cup? To glorify God. No, I'm just kidding.
But-
but that's true though, right? Yeah,
But
for sure.
last month we talked about impacting the culture, and this is the main way we impact our culture. And because marriage brings on kids, kids, we love on them, we teach them right from wrong, and we hopefully, like Tanner said earlier, we have no say, we can't guarantee our kids' salvation, but we can point them in the right direction and hope that they learn to have that relationship with God like we have, and that, by doing that, we are glorifying God and just growing the kingdom. So I get it's a Sunday school answer, but it's the ultimate purpose of all of our lives. Is the whole reason we're here is to glorify God.
Yeah, most of the time, the Sunday school answers actually are correct answers. Yeah, yeah, and so this past Sunday, you two know, the world doesn't, but this past Sunday, the text was Ephesians 5:22-33, which is wives and husbands, and talking about, like, the context obviously is, again, walking as children of light. What does that look like? What does it look like? Verse 15, look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. It goes on and on and on. And then it comes to this, being subject to one another in the fear of Christ in verse 21. And it goes on to talk about wives and husbands and those roles. This coming week, we'll start chapter 6, and it's going to be talking about children and parents and those roles. And this is very important. And the purpose of marriage. So on the one hand, you start, and I think I might have brought this up in when I was preaching. I don't remember if I did or not, but on the one hand, the purpose of marriage begins in the beginning, right? When you read the dominion mandate, right? Genesis 1:26-ish, that whole area there. He made them in his image, male and female. He created them, and then the image bearer thing was so important, and what they were supposed to do is, as his image bearers, have dominion, right? So that's a big part of it. That would be fit right in line with the bring glory to God, that's what images of God are supposed to do, right? In all that we do. And so it's no accident that that is one of the foundational things that God put in place for his image bearers to do, is be united with one another and go conquer, right? Go have dominion in the world. Secondly, is what we talked about on Sunday in that text, is this whole representing Christ and his church. That's the picture that gets painted with marriage. And so that's a pretty basic purpose to be thinking about. So, and it helps, I think, both husband and wife, if you look at it from that perspective, it'll help both parties know where they're falling short and where they need work, and maybe where God is blessing them with growth, right?
Yeah.
And personal growth in certain areas. So, so the purpose of marriage is massive. It's a massive subject.
Yeah, it's God's means of one of his means of redeeming the world.
Yeah.
All throughout the Old Testament, you read that there's so many places in Isaiah that says his salvation will come and his righteousness will be revealed. And the gospel is the power of God for salvation, for in it the righteousness of God is revealed. The end of all things is God being fully glorified by having all of his saints reflecting his image and being restored back to the image that was lost in Adam. And every single human that's going to be in heaven was first inside of a mother's womb at one point. So, and there's only one way that happens, and that happens through God instituting marriage and creating humans through the means of other humans, and them being a reflection of him in this earth until it's redeemed. Yeah,
that's really good, and so it's helpful that you talk about it that way, because that's it's not just me and my wife.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just our marriage, but it's just marriage in general. We are all part of a much grander thing than even just what's going on at my house right now.
Yeah.
Or your house, like it's a lot bigger than that. And just super important to remember that and to think about it that way. What are some of the main responsibilities that you think, like when you think about it for men, let's say, especially the main responsibilities that for you and I as men of God who are going to lead Christian homes, what would some of the main things be? Like, what are the priorities? What are the things we can't miss on?
Yeah, I think one thing, this is by no means like the number one standalone thing, but one thing is doing family worship, which you guys already mentioned. Not just having the few minutes each evening of family worship, but having a house of worship. That's how God is glorified, by a home worshiping. And I think a lot of people think that that's just a Presbyterian thing sometimes.
So define that a little. What do you mean by that? Like a house of worship? Because when people think about family worship, I think that what will enter their mind is nothing but like the time at the end of the day or whatever. And that's not wrong.
Right.
But what do you mean by what you said, like a house of worship?
Yeah, thanks. I didn't think of that. So having like Jesus said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. So teaching our kids to do that, to use their mind in a way that is loving to God, thinking his thoughts after him with all of their heart, with that being the first foundational thing to every action that's taken. So having a house of worship would look like everybody ordering their steps according to what God would have us do in a way that glorifies him. For instance, like even something as simple as like having the kids have their room clean. That's a way that we can show reverence towards God by being good stewards of what he's given us and things like that. So letting that be the first foundation for all the things that you do, I think constitutes worship. Teaching them that, like at our age, or our kids' age, we're teaching them things like when thunder cracks outside, they need to know that that's God did that, and that human life comes from God, and that our food that we eat is directly a gift from God. So those things. But I think that does flow out of having that kind of mind, does flow out of doing the specific act of family worship, of reading the scriptures, singing, and maybe even catechizing if you want. Teaching them how to worship God. Because he does command that all men repent. Every single human is commanded to repent, and every single human is commanded to worship. And I think lots of times we have the attitude that they need to learn the gospel, and then if they choose to come to Christ, then they'll worship him, or then they'll pray. But they're commanded to pray. They're sinning if they're not praying. There's a spot in the 1689 talking about good works that says that when an unbeliever does not do good works as defined in the Bible, they're sinning worse than if they were to do them as an unregenerate person. So even if your kids are unregenerate, if they're not Christians, you're protecting them from more measure of God's wrath against them by teaching them to worship and even demanding it of them. They need to worship God. It's a command from him, and if they're not doing it, then they're sinning worse than if they would do it, even if they had the wrong heart behind it.
15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever it looks like, depending on the age of your kids, that's going to change a lot. But that time at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day or whenever at dinner time, whenever it works for each particular family, that time of, we'll say, organized family worship is paramount and very important.
Yep.
But what you're talking about is essentially being a Christian all the time. And I think that I could see some people in our particular culture and society who, you know, we go to church, we do Awana, we're part of a Bible study. Can I just watch some Clint Eastwood and forget about it all?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Right.
Right. And that's the important thing, I think, to keep in mind. Like, this Christian thing is an all of life thing.
Yeah.
It's not a sometimes thing. It's not like guys, we kind of are built. So women famously have this kind of spaghetti thing going on up there, right?
Noodle heads.
I'll edit that out.
Okay.
But no, I'm going to send it directly to Taylor after this. But men, like, we compartmentalize stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a helpful thing for us to be able to do the things that we're called to do. It's helpful to be able to, okay, put all the other junk out of my mind. I need to focus on this task, on this thing that I have to finish and get done. So work is a compartment, family is a compartment, and God is a compartment, right? Church life, a compartment. But it cannot be like that.
Yeah.
That's not good enough. That's not what being a Christian is. It's not something that a person can compartmentalize. So whether we're talking about family or anything else, you are not a Christian and a Republican and an American and a husband and no, you're a Christian who's an American. Mm-hmm. You're a Christian husband. You're a Christian dad. You're a Christian employee. That you don't shed that off into some little corner and have it as a compartment in your life. It has to define all of life. And so so what you're talking about is essentially the definition of all of it. Of leading your home as a godly man. That's the whole thing.
Yeah. All of those compartments need to be picked up and put into the God compartment.
Right.
He owns every single one of them.
Yeah.
And he's sovereign over every single sphere of your life. There's no area that he's not allowed into.
Right. And not only that, but to your point, to all of them go into the God compartment, not only is he like allowed into them, it's
He owns them.
It's his.
Yeah, it's his compartment
It's
that
his.
he made.
And frankly, I think we don't think about it like this, but if he's given you the resources to have, I joked about Clint Eastwood or whatever, right? If he's given you the resources to have that television, right? You need to understand that even that is something to be stewarded.
Yeah.
That is something to be. So if you have Disney Plus, get rid of that right now.
Yeah.
Right now.
Give us some men who know the truth.
Yeah.
Get rid of Disney Plus and go. I don't know. Download Canon Plus or G3 Plus or I don't know, any number of things that aren't terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. That TV belongs to God.
Yeah, it
and
does.
He should be consulted with whatever you're going to put on it. I mean, would you have Jesus come into your house and sit there and watch it with you? I mean, that's a classic thing, but that's what you're doing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yep.
Can't go wrong with Roy Rogers or John Wayne.
John Wayne. Yeah, he's a godly role model, that John Wayne. So let's talk. We're an hour and a half in, right? We need to start thinking about the end of this sucker. So let's talk about this. Our current Christian culture, and we've talked about it a little bit here and there, right? But in current Christianity in our nation, and I realize even that's kind of has to be nuanced because geographically it really does depend where you are. And lots of factors, right? But just typically in Christian culture, when it comes to making disciples at home, what are some mistakes that Christians make in our particular culture? What are some failings, some areas that we really need to hey, you're not thinking about this, think about it.
I think, and this is also part of the reason why I love the Ken Ham book I shared with you guys about Will They Stand? Because he talked about how we're not, it's kind of what you brought up with the whole purity generation. We told them, no sex till marriage or whatever, but we never, told them the why or the science that goes into all this that makes, now, do I think it'd stop some? Yeah, I would, but not everybody. But the point is, we're not teaching our kids why, or how, or the apologetics, because his whole thing was about teaching the kids apologetics, because most time our kids live in this bubble world, most of the kids they know, especially if they're homeschooled or whatever, is from church, and their worldview is what we teach them. Then that we let them out into the world, telling them, it's because God said, but we don't teach them how to defend it. And I think that's something that a lot of parents do this make of, because I don't care who your kid is, unless he's a genius. He goes to a college, almost any professor that's worth their salt that is of the opposite opinion is going to make your kid doubt himself. Now, I'm not saying all of us have to teach our kids that level, but our kids need to know how to defend it and know the arguments and this and that. And I think that's something that we aren't doing as parents. We're just saying, this is why,
Yeah, I would personally say no matter the school situation that your children grow up in, apologetics is a must, right? But not only you said to be able to argue the point, be able to defend it, which is a hearty yes, but also to be able to defend it to themselves because of that, right? Because I'm going to fail at this. I already know it at some level, but my goal is no matter what the boys end up doing when they leave, if it involves college, right? First of all, unless it's some sort of, engineer or something that like you have no choice but to go to some sort of secular garbage, university. And all secular universities are garbage at this point, every one of them. You're going to learn just as much complete trash as anything helpful. And so to some degree, they would be doing it just to get a piece of paper they need to get to whatever actual goal they have. But I want both of them to know everything this or that unbiblical, ungodly professor is going to throw at them before they get into the classroom the first time. I want them to go and hear that professor say those things and go, okay, yeah, I knew this would come. Here's why that's stupid. Like I want them to be able to do that. And so you're right. I think that's a big deal. Another thing that I would say on top of what you offered was the intake, like we just talked about that God owns your TV, right? But how many Christian parents, kids have phones and electronic devices, iPads, whatever, and it's just unmitigated.
Yeah.
It's just, now I'm all for kids having those things so that they learn how to properly use them and steward them and be guarded and all those things. Because you don't want them training themselves on it, having never been exposed, right? But you can't allow, look, if your child, who is young enough to live under your roof, has TikTok, burn that sucker.
Yeah.
Right? That does nothing but manipulate your kids, and not in a good way. Social media, I think, just in general, but TikTok is a bad one. But social media in general for kids, it's just, they're just learning how to be social like this.
Yeah.
Right? So neither of, so we're getting into like personal opinion now a little bit, but both of my sons have phones now. I can see every movement they make on them. They have time limits on them, apart from texting us or calls. And they're not allowed to take them in private places in the house. But we have all sorts of guards up for this. Can you have enough guards up? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's the world we live in. I'm not sure. Yeah. But we're trying. They do not have social media accounts. And I think that's probably something that we'll introduce when they're like a year out from leaving, I would really love to introduce it after both of them have learned they don't need any of it. Yeah. But so that's another thing that I think like parents are really dropping the ball on. Your kids cannot be raised by YouTube and TikTok. That's not a good babysitter.
Yeah.
What else?
I think just inconsistencies in our own faithfulness in that regard. Like even just in little stuff, for instance, when you have unbelievers in your home, do you still pray before you eat? Little things like that, because the kids notice that. They see, oh, so and so came over and we don't pray when they're here, or we need to be very faithful and bold in front of our kids so that they can see like people do actually do this. People do actually say this is objective reality that God created, and it doesn't matter what the consensus of the room is. When it's in our house, the consensus of the room is that Jesus Christ is the king, and what he says goes.
Yep.
And I think there's so many ways that we're inconsistent with that. It's so easy to be inconsistent or to think things like, I don't want to embarrass these people that we invited over, or make them uncomfortable by doing this or that.
Or you're embarrassed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think one time I heard Greg Bonson say that half the time that we're so horrible at evangelism, or I think you said most of the time we're so horrible at evangelism is not because we're scared to say the stuff, but because we feel awkward acting like Christians.
Yeah.
And that's very convicting, because I think that's a worse problem than actually just getting it out of your mouth.
I think that there's a reason that Paul said that he's not ashamed of the gospel. Mm-hmm. I don't. It's amazing how powerful that little problem is.
Yeah.
You know, and some people just don't deal with that. I don't know how, but some people don't deal with that. But by and large, I mean, people are going to struggle with that to some degree.
Yeah.
Like, you got to make sure you do it.
Yeah.
You know, when the unbeliever is there, you have to be intentional and do it. You know,
I agree. I also think there's and I'm saying you need to do it, but there's a grace that needs to come with it too, because that's something I'll struggle with. You know, for example, my one of my sister-in-laws, before she married her husband, was living with the guy, and sometimes I'm a little too blunt. It's like they're always welcome to come stay, but the rule was they can't sleep in the same room. You know, he's gonna, you know, and sometimes my wife likes to remind me, you need to be, you know, I'm totally behind you in agreement with it, but you need to be a little bit more.
like how you say it and that sort of thing. For sure. Yeah, because you're right. I mean, it could be easy to come off as just a jerk too, right? And that's not what we want either.
Yeah.
Right. But because the kids will pick up on that also.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And I am not ashamed of the gospel is something that we all need to be able to say that.
Yeah.
And not be like just paying lip service to something.
Right.
But
yeah, not just our kids too, but our wives, they get encouragement. I mean, we are leading them. Whether we're doing a good job of it or not, we are still leading them. So we could be leading them badly. We could be leading them and showing them how to be ashamed of the gospel, if that's what we're doing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the same way that you're subliminally teaching your daughters what kind of man they're, it's all connected. Like, that's how it happens. So, like, you can teach whatever you'd like verbally,
Yeah.
but they learn much more by watching you.
Yeah.
They really do. And I think one of the problems in our nation has been that it seems like the goal, at least at some level, for parenting, Christian parenting, has been to make sure that they're good Americans.
Yeah.
Right? And not the focus not necessarily be let's create godly men and women who are not ashamed of the gospel, right? Who would love to be martyred.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that part of that is we'll end up teaching, it's North Dakota, right? Like, we'll end up teaching work ethic and respect your elders and that kind of thing. And this is how you communicate. This is how you, all these things, right? Pay your taxes and,
Yeah.
get good grades and do a good job at work. But the theological training doesn't exist.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
I think our kids need to get taught too that they're going to.
Hell.
Yeah. Also true. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to do it. That was my Ben impression.
Yeah. Well, when they're telling other people to turn or burn, they're going to get pushback from it. We need to teach them that.
True story.
Yep. And I think about in the future too, like, it's easy because my kids are little. But what about when they're like 10 and they're off in the room by them with an atheist extended family member or something, and they say something about Jesus, and they start insulting them for it, or telling them that's not true. Like, they need to be prepared that people are going to hate that, and to be bold about it. And where I was going with that is to at some point we're gonna have to be brave enough to let them go into those situations and maybe even get hurt, maybe physically.
Oh,
Like
sure.
you talk about getting martyred. Would we be okay with letting our kids get martyred? Would we let them have that spiritual gift, as the Bible calls it, or are we going to try to protect them from that? Because it would be so easy as a parent to, not let your kid wear something that's going to be offensive to somebody, and then you're teaching them, well, but don't proclaim the gospel if it's going to cause you trouble.
Right, yeah.
Even
Yeah.
if that's not your intention.
Or in this world, don't proclaim the gospel because you might offend that person.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think, like one of the, like I have a couple of other questions that I wrote here, but like we've covered so much of it just in the conversation. And I think what are the last question that I put on this paper for us to talk about is what are the hopes and outcomes of a truly Christian home? And we've already talked about some of those things, right? When we talked about purpose of marriage and that kind of thing. But just real quickly, let everybody just talk real quick about that particular thing. Like this is the culmination of the whole thing. Why? Here's the why, right? What's the hope? What's the point? What's the outcome we're looking for at the end of the day?
Yeah. I think first, we obviously would like our kids to be saved. We want them to be saved. That's the first goal, and we want other people to be saved because our kids were saved and so on and so forth. But also, we want them to know where to go when they do sin. And also, we want the subconsciousness of society to be reset, to use a Marxist term, but we want it to be reset to Christ.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's,
Communist.
Stealing their stuff.
yeah. Oh, all right. Yeah. We can, what do we call it? Repurpose? No, that's not right.
Reclaim.
Yeah.
Huh?
Reclaim.
There you go.
Reform?
Oh,
I mean, use the obvious term.
we've both been spanked, Marshall. Yeah, we can reform their garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah, good call. Marshall, you got anything? Last comments? What's the point?
What Tanner said, want to be killed, kingdom builders. I want to be a Deuteronomy 6 and 7. That's what I want to see my kids do with their kids. And then I want to, I don't think I'll be around that long, but then I want to see my kids do that with their grandkids and down the line. That's what I hope and want to see out of this is,
I got one more thing to add.
Go.
More importantly than all the stuff we said, we want those kids to be one of the rewards that God the Father gives to his son.
Yep.
Because he promised him an inheritance
Yep.
of all of his spiritual children that would come to him. So we want that reward to be given to him, because imagine the joy that God the Father has in rewarding to his son all of the saints that he died for, all the things he did as the suffering servant. So we want to be part of the means of him getting his reward.
Yeah. I mean, all that is obviously spot on. I think, I just flipped over to Revelation chapter 7, and now there are many places a person could go to kind of make the point I'm going to try and make here, but Revelation 7, beginning in verse 9, it says this: "After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could count, from every nation and all tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes. And palm branches were in their hands, and they cry out with a loud voice, saying, 'Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb.' And all the angels were standing around the throne, and the elders and the 4 living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshipped God, saying, Amen. The blessing and the glory and the wisdom and the thanksgiving and the honor and the power and the strength be to our God forever and ever. Amen. That is a worship service that I would like my sons to be at. And to be there with my wife, who at that point will just be a sister in Christ.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Any last comments, fellas? Last things. I just read
Last
from
thing.
Revelation.
Nice.
You see what I did there? All right. Anyway. Bye.